Hello, my little triglets. Welcome back to Video Trig. Today we're going to do section 7.4, and this section is not horribly difficult, but it's rather tedious, meaning you have to be very, very careful when you do things in this chapter or this section. So buckle your chin straps because you're going to have to be strong and be careful. All right, let's look at an example here. Let's say I gave you these as your zeros, and I asked you to write an equation. Write an equation that has those as their zeros. Well, the first thing you would do is you'd put them in their parentheses form. Now, this form is called the product of linear factors. Now you have to know that because that's how the directions are going to be worded. Write as a product of linear factors. So you have to know that that means the parentheses form. Okay, any amount of parentheses. Now if I were to write the equation, I would FOIL these two first. So x squared minus those two together make 4x plus 4. And then I would take that, each of these, and distribute it to that other parentheses. So let's start with x squared. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times 4 is 4x squared. Now we're going to do the negative 4x times the x is negative 4x squared times the 4 is negative 16x. Then we're going to do the 4. So 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times 4 is 16. Now I'm just going to get like terms together. X cubed is by itself. These two cancel out, so they're gone. Then I have minus 16 and a plus 4. That'd be minus 12x plus 16. You put your y equals on there, and you've got your equation. Okay, but the main thing I want you to know from all of this is how to set it up. You set it up in the parentheses, and remember, it's opposite sign. See? And that's important. Now, what if I gave you, okay, let's back up a second here. Square root of negative 4. You guys learned that in Algebra 2, that the negative really means it's imaginary. That would be 2i. The imaginary, or the negative comes out as imaginary, square root of 4 is 2. Now, in these problems, we're going to have complex number answers. Complex means you have part imaginary, part normal, and they sometimes write it like this. Here's the normal, here's the imaginary. So if I say one of the zeros is 3 plus 2i, there's a rule that says automatically there's another 0, 3 minus 2i. Because of the square root property, this is plus or minus. So if they give you this one, you have to know that that's another one. Okay, they're not going to give you both, but you have to know that there are two. So let me go to the next page because we're going to need a full amount of paper here. All right, let's say I want you to find a polynomial function that has 1 plus 5i and 2 as the zeros. Okay, so right away you need to be thinking, oh, all right, I have 1 minus 5i is also a 0. Now putting these in the parentheses form, we need to do that. We have 3 zeros, so I have 3 parentheses, and all of them are going to be x minus, x minus, x minus. So x minus 2 would be our first one. Then x minus 1 plus 5i, and x minus 1 minus 5i. Same procedure, just looks a little weird because of all the I stuff. Okay, now the easiest way to do these is to FOIL these two together, and then we'll wait till last to do the x minus 2. So I'm going to I'm going to distribute the negative signs inside these little parentheses to get rid of those interior parentheses. X minus 2 is still there, then x minus 1 minus 5i, and x minus 1 plus 5i. All right, so let's start with x. I'm going to distribute it to these three. So I get x squared minus x plus 5xi. Okay, next I'm going to do the minus 1. So negative x plus 1 minus 5i. Next I'm going to do the minus 5i, so minus 5xi plus 5i, and then minus 25i squared. Now, do you remember if I equals the square root of negative 1, what does I squared equal? Well, just square both sides here and you should get negative 1. So we'll have to remember that when we come to the end here. All right, what can we cancel out? Looks like this can go away with this. This can go away with this. And that looks like about it. So I've got x squared minus 2x. Now this plus 1 and this, if I squared is negative 1, this is really negative 25. Plus 1 would be negative 24. So all of that reduced down to those three terms. And now I've got x minus 2 that I have to distribute to both. So let's start with the x. X times x squared is x cubed. X times negative 2x squared. And then negative 24x. Then we'll go to the negative 2. So negative 2x squared plus 4x and plus 48. Combining like terms, I've got x cubed minus 4x squared minus 20x plus 48. So there you go. And then you have to put an equals y on it, otherwise it's not a function. So again, not terribly difficult, but you got to be careful, especially with all those i's and things. When you get to this point right here, all the i's should be gone when you simplify that. So that's kind of a check right in the middle of your problem. All right, now this next one. Before I move on to the next one, I want to remind you that this idea here, where you have two of them, works with square roots too. If you have a plus square root of b, you also have a minus square root of b. So for instance, if I had 3 plus root 2 for a root, then 3 minus root 2 is automatically another root. And these work just like these down here. You put them in exactly the same way. And when you square a square root, it ends up being just what's underneath. So same exact process, but instead of I, you have square root. All right, this next one. Tighten those chin straps just a little bit. It's a little bit bumpy ride here. Okay. We have an equation, y equals x to the fourth minus 6x to the third plus 10x squared plus 2x minus 15. And you are given that 2 plus I is a 0. Okay, we don't have access to our graphing calculator right now, so we're going to have to do these by hand. Right away, I know that 2 minus I is also a 0. Now in the past, when we knew a couple of zeros, we put them in the press box and worked it out until we got it down to quadratic, and then we either factored or did the quadratic formula. So guess what? We're going to have to do the press box, but with these two zeros. So it's going to get a little crazy here for a minute. All right, let's start with the first one, 2 plus I. Then I have 1, negative 6, 10, 2, and negative 15. Bring down the 1. 1 times 2 plus I is 2 plus I. Negative 4 plus I. I'm going to put it in parentheses just to keep it separate from the other ones. Now I have to take 2 plus I in the press box and multiply it by my negative 4 plus I. I'm going to do that over here. because I have to FOIL it, and it's hard to do in my head. So I have negative 8, then I have 2i and minus 4i. That's minus 2i, and then I have I squared, but I squared is really negative 1. So combine that with the negative 8, I get negative 9 minus 2i. So that's what goes here. Add those up, I get 1 minus 2i. Well, we got to do it again. 2 plus I, 1 minus 2i. FOIL it, I get 2 minus 4, and a plus 1 would be minus 3i. And then negative 2i squared would really be plus 2. So 4 minus 3i goes here. Add those up, 6 minus 3i. I'm putting it in parentheses just so it doesn't get mixed up with the others. Okay, now if this is a 0, hopefully we end up with a 0 here. Okay, so let's see if that works. So I have to do 2 plus I and 6 minus 3i and FOIL this out. So I have 12. Then I have negative 6 and positive 6i, that's gone, and then minus 3i squared, which would actually be plus 3, so Lord have mercy, it worked. So a 0 there, and we put a big happy face. All right, so that didn't get us anywhere yet because these still have imaginary parts to it, and we have to get it, we have to do synthetic division with the next one. And I'm going to do it in red so you can separate a little bit. So 2 minus I, we're going to do with this depressed polynomial we just got. So I bring down the 1, and then 2 minus I times 1 is 2 minus I. And guess what? I got negative 2, but the i's cancel out, so that's a good sign. That's what we're supposed to do. All right, so now negative 2 times 2 minus I would be negative 4 plus 2i. I get negative 3, and once again, those cancel. That's great. Now the next one, I get negative 6 plus 3i. Both parts cancel, and so I get 0, and that's what I'm supposed to get if we put in a 0 in the press box. Now what's left is x squared minus 2x minus 3. Okay. Well, can we factor that? Let's see, x and x. The 3 break into a 3 and a 1. I need negative 2, so make it negative 3 and plus 1. So cool, those are our other two answers. So our two answers from this plus the other two are the 4 zeros. And that's what we were trying to find, is the zeros for this graph. Now, on your graphing calculator, it looks very strange when you get imaginary answers. If I have 3 plus 2i on the graphing calculator, it's going to look like 3, 2. This is the normal number. This is the imaginary number. Okay, so let's do a couple more. If I have negative 3 minus 4i, that would come out as negative 3, negative 4. If I just have 5i, that would come out as 0, 5. Okay, so you get the idea? But this, when you get this on your calculator, I don't want you to write that. I want you to write this as a solution. Okay. Also, the calculators aren't as powerful as computers, and sometimes they get a number like 0.9999999, 7. Well, we're going to say that that's 1. Or negative 0.000000005, we're going to say that that's really a 0. So if you get numbers that are very, very, very close to, a whole number or 0, another thing you might see is like 3.27 times 10, or no, I think they put e to the negative 14. Well, that means I have 14 zeros in front of it, so that's really going to be 0. So I'm just giving you some examples of what you might see in the calculator that might confuse you as to what the answer is. But but just remember if it's really, really close or if it's e to the negative, it's probably 0. Okie dokie. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.